Hi guys, and welcome along to this week's webinar. So I wanted to focus a little bit in terms of narrowing your vision as to how you're spending your time, how we can be more effective with our time, and following on from previous webinars on time, how best we can utilize that for your current goals and what it is that you're currently trying to achieve. So I've titled it "Where Focus Goes, Energy Flows," and that's a common saying. I'm sure you'll have heard it all before, and I'm just going to kind of break that down into looking at where our focus goes in our training, what we should be focusing on when we're training, and then actually what else we can focus on around that. So then in like a hierarchical sense, where does our training fit within the day, and how important should it be going forwards. So I've got a kind of obviously like a clock face behind me, and obviously 24 hours in a day. Most of the time you might train for 1 hour. So let's go with that general rule that you'll be hitting your training session for an hour, okay? And that training session will take priority for that day, for example, and you might put a lot of focus, a lot of energy, and a lot of importance when it comes to your goals on that training session. And what I want to do is first off say yes, that's okay, but I just want to highlight one fundamental issue. Most of the time, in fact, do you know what? I don't even know the average on this, but let's say you train for between 3 and 5 sessions a week. Therefore, we're trying to pin our goals, our hopes, our dreams, our accomplishments, aspirations, everything on maximal 5 hours out of kind of a possible however many there are in a week, okay? 160 odd. So when we break it down and we look at a training session in any given day, that 1 hour, your training session for 1 hour equates to just over 4% of that day. So it's important, but it's important for reasons that perhaps aren't necessarily the first reasons that you're thinking of. And it's then even more important to think about what we're doing with our other, 95.5% of our day. Like, where is our energy going? What are we flowing into for that rest of that day? Are we pinning ourselves that we've trained for an hour and therefore everything else will take care of itself? Because actually, we're only hitting that 4% of the day, and we could be better maximizing the other 95 and a bit massively. If we take that, if we're operating at say 5 out of 10 for the rest of our day in terms of the things we want to achieve that move us slightly closer towards our goals, we take that 5 out of 10 and turn it into an 8 out of 10, you're hitting 80% say of the 95% that's available for you that day. Versus we maximize our session really hard. We get as much out of it as we possibly can. We train for maybe a little bit longer, whatever. We're changing that 4.5% to 5 or 6, and we could be massively neglecting the other 95% of our day. And actually, if we better improve some of our processes, routines, habits within that day, not only are we better equipped to make the most of our training sessions and achieve more within those training sessions, but we're also more likely to get to our goals a lot easier, potentially a lot quicker, and just with a lot less kind of resistance, because we're better utilising our time. And that's what I want to kind of touch on today. So when we're looking at training, I do just want to kind of big training up, for want of a better term, to start with. And I just want to say, I'm a personal trainer, obviously. I love training, and I love training for so many reasons. Firstly, kind of for my mental health, in terms of just supporting, anxiety, depression, whatever that may be, but also just that clarity of thought, time for myself, structure, routine, testing myself, accomplishments, whether that be returning from injury, for example, in a very specific case my own, whether it be trying something new for the first time, trying a different sport, trying a different way of training, meeting friends, making friends, strength, bone health, muscle health, joint health, And I've listed however many things there before I've even listed, for example, the calorie burn within a training session, which may be one of many reasons why you are training if you're working towards, say, like a fat loss goal. But for me, the calorie burn as a result of your training session falls like 10th on the list. Even if that's one of your main goals, your main goal is fat loss, there is so many other benefits that you can be achieving and striving for within your training. And then, as I said, letting the other 95% of the day take care of itself, your daily activity, your nutrition, your habits outside of the gym, what your nutrition looks like and things like this. That for me is super important. And I just wanted to put that out there because training has its place. It has its place in your routine throughout your week as frequently as works best for you, as consistently as works best for you, and it should be a focus. However, when we're talking about striving towards a fat loss goal, for example, we have to ensure we're maximizing the other 95% of the day. And what does the other 95% of the day look like? Well, we're looking at things like our sleep, our stress levels, but also like our total daily energy expenditure and how we can manipulate that. And all of these play a massive part in you helping achieve your goals, no matter what they are. Whether you are looking for a performance-based goal, obviously training is important, so is stress reduction, so is improving and maximizing your sleep, and so is understanding where you sit within your total daily energy expenditure and how you can fuel your body. It's the exact same if fat loss is your goal. If we're super stressed, we're getting poor sleep, we're throwing a whole kind of hormonal party up in the air, we're pouring a load into this stress bucket that we've referred to before, and we're potentially just kind of putting up that higher resistance level in terms of making the goals, the changes, just a little bit more easier to achieve, a little bit more straightforward to achieve. Fundamentally, that is exactly what we want to do. So if we touch on stress, for example, now I really like the kind of analogy of like that stress bucket. So we've got everything coming in at the top. That's your work stress, your life stress, relationship stress, family stress, whether you've got children or no children, pets, no pets, money, as I've said, relationships, your training, everything. But then at the bottom, we can puncture holes in that bucket so that the stress comes out. Now, training for me, or exercising, moving, is certainly a hole or two in the bottom of that bucket. But I also know it feeds into the top, so it's a balance. Might be going on holiday, might be reading a book, might be going for walks, might be speaking with friends. It could be a number of different things that puncture holes in the bottom of the bucket. But it's important that as the water flows in, if it's building up and then overflowing over the top of that bucket, we've got to work on stemming the flow in and creating better holes at the bottom. And it's basically about how much time you spend in your parasympathetic versus your sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic being that fight or flight response. Heart rate kind of elevates, pupils dilate, we're ready to go, we're slowing down digestion, we're slowing down bladder movements, we're slowing down everything internally because the body's going, right, I'm ready to go. But we can't live like that all the time. And more, we are living like that. Then your parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite. It's there to go, whoa, tries to bring your heart rate back down towards that resting position. It will let you go through those digestive processes, let your bladder go through the processes it needs to so that you can urinate, your pupils will reset themselves, everything will just start to slow down. And it's important that we don't spend 23 hours of the day chasing that sympathetic, that on, heart rate is up. And this is little things where understanding like your anxiety levels, your stress levels, and your relationship with things like caffeine and things like that, which is a whole nother podcast that I can go into and a whole nother webinar that I can go into at some point. But in terms of your stress levels across a day, training and getting your training session in is going to spike your stress at some point. It's a stressor on the body, just as everything else is. So it's important that we understand that and prep for it as well as possible and recover as well as possible. But it's also just important that with COVID, that, yes, I'm mentioning it again, I feel like I mention it a lot, but you know, the last year has been incredibly stressful. Lots has changed for every single person. There's been a kind of relationship effect for everyone somewhere, potentially like work effects, all sorts of stress effects as a result of the last year that we've been through. So we all have probably spent a lot more time in that sympathetic fight or flight. Everything's changing, what am I going to do? So we've got to understand, we've got to start bringing ourselves out of it. And just as we start bringing ourselves out of it, just as my podcast a couple of weeks ago went through the anxiety around returning to normal, there's another stress coming in because we've been in this change period for so long. There is now a level of anxiety around coming back to social occasions and things like that. So we have to be mindful of that. So we just need to work towards having that better relationship with stress, understanding the bucket, understanding your tools to put holes in the bottom of your bucket, but understanding as well if that sympathetic system is go, go, go and water is flooding into that bucket, we've got to find a way of giving that parasympathetic nervous system a chance to slow down. And that, on a minute detail, we're going through that every single day. That sits in our 95% of our day. How are we winning that battle? Or how are we dealing with life stresses? Are we dealing with them well enough so that we can try and set these goals, whether it be muscle building, going to events, trying different things, trialing a gym, fat loss, whatever it may be? Are we giving ourselves an opportunity to be in the best place to strive and thrive within that environment? Because that's what we want to do. When it comes to sleep, quality, quantity, routine, 3 super key words that we're just going to touch on quickly. And sleep plays a huge part of your clock. You know, it should really make up between 7 and 9 hours of most nights. Some people will cope better with less, some people will need more, some people naturally will sleep better than others, things like that. But it's a process and an element of our life that we all need not to neglect. It is so important that we think about our sleep from a recovery point of view, from a mental health point of view, from a stress point of view, from a goal setting, training, motivation point of view, just from a life in general point of view, okay? And the quality for me is far more important than the quantity. So making sure that we're going through those REM cycles, those 90-minute sleep cycles, where we are transitioning through from light to deeper to rapid eye movement, deep sleep, and then coming back up and out of it, that our breath is nice and even throughout the night, and we go through that cycle anywhere between 90 minutes long, so we're talking like 4 to 8 cycles throughout that night, getting in some good cycles of sleep, rather than, we all know when we've had those nights where, especially if you have a sleep tracker like a watch on, for example, and it says 7 hours, but you think, I feel like I was awake the whole night, and then you think about it and it was a really light sleep. You never quite settled, your heart rate never quite dropped, you never dropped into that deep rapid eye movement sleep where we're able to kind of unload the day. It's like downloading the day on a computer. It's just able to go into that longer term memory bank, and we're able to just press reset a little bit. Hormonal balance then stays pretty even when we wake up, versus hormones like leptin and ghrelin, which are our hunger and kind of satiation hormones, being all over the place because we're looking for that quick fix of energy because we've maybe had a poor night's sleep the night before. And things like recovery, we place so much importance on our training throughout the week, and I love that. We need to make sure we're recovering well from it. We need to make sure that we can recover from that training load, and sleep again is going to play a big part in that. Those muscles are going to get a chance to repair, chance to just stop for a second, go through their processes that they need to go through in order for you to carry on trying to strive and thrive for those goals that you've set. And we can create routines. We can, routine sometimes I think sounds like such a formal word, like it's a half an hour thing that you've got to do some yoga, then you've got to light a candle, then you've got to sit there for 15 minutes and meditate, then you've got to do a 15-minute block of reading, your phone's got to go off at 7 p.m. and things like this. It doesn't have to be as regimented as that, but something as simple as going to bed and waking up at the same time for our circadian rhythm is so important. Potentially looking at some supplementation around magnesium and things like that might also be another option for you. But just thinking about the pure basics of a bedtime, so a similar time to go to sleep and a similar time to wake up, is literally the most basic routine that you could set. But if you stuck to it and were consistent with it, and it improved then your sleep quality or quantity, you would see improvements. Then you can start pulling it back and saying, yeah, potentially being on your phone right up until the point you put it down, roll over and go to sleep isn't perhaps the most beneficial way of unwinding to go to bed. Because we all now know about, the blue light that's emitted into our eyes and things like that. It's not letting us release that melatonin, that kind of process that our body goes through in order to unwind and go to sleep. Potentially like the timings of your caffeine and things like that, we can pull so much of it apart. But fundamentally, having a good temperature, having an adequate temperature to the room, so not too hot being the main point there, a comfortable bed, comfortable pillow, and aiming to go to sleep at a similar time, things like that can really, really help build this quality and quantity, which can help us deal with our stress, help us hit our 4.16% for our training harder and harder every time, and then help us manage how much we move and the quality of our nutrition, which fundamentally then brings us right up to the other 95% of our day. Your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so the calories you burn whilst you're going about your day-to-day life, walking across the supermarket car park, walking around the supermarket, doing a bit of gardening. We've all heard it kind of mentioned in that kind of 10,000 step bracket. That daily activity is so key, especially if fat loss is your goal, because it makes up a hell of a lot more of the calorie burn that you're going to do in the day if you keep it literally not even sky high but just moderate. It's going to burn more than your training session. Okay, your training session, as we touched on right at the start, is there to make you feel like a kick-ass human being, an epic human being, strong, fit, confident, toned, confident in your clothes fit better. It's there to do all sorts of things like that. As I said, your bone health, your joint health, muscle strength, all sorts. But your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, how much you move just in a given day, that is going to be the key. That's the difference. When we add it to our BMR, which is our basal metabolic rate, which is about 70% of the calories we burn every day, that's us living, breathing, moderating our temperature, blinking, all of the kind of internal systems that are at work for us to continue to live as a human being. That's taking up 70% of your calorie burn. On top of that, we've got 20-ish% is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the calories that you're burning as and when you move around throughout your day. Next up is your thermic effect of food, so the calories we burn when we're digesting, which is why protein is so key, because a third of the calories you bring in, a third of the calories you bring in when you eat protein then go on digesting it. So it's taking care of itself to a point. And then you've got your exercise, your EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis. They're the two smallest bunches. Now they add a huge amount of quality to your life in terms of a good high protein diet is going to keep your thermic effect of food nice and high. And your training, as I've said so many times throughout this webinar, is so important for so many aspects, but we can't neglect the fact that BMR, which we can tweak to a degree in terms of our muscle percentage and things like that, is 70-ish% of what we're going to do on a given day. And then there's your NEAT. Moving around as much as you possibly can gives you that bang for your buck, that win that's easy to achieve, that isn't really constricted by anything to a point in terms of you don't require access to a gym to go and do it. You just might have to think outside the box if you're an office worker or if you've got a young family. And it's just thinking outside the box. But if we can think outside the box and improve that 95%, as I said at the start here, we take that from like a 5 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10, we're going to be smashing those days. And that 8 out of 10 allows us to put as much effort as we can into our performance in our training, which then that list of positives that is almost endless from training, that just gets improved and improved and improved and improved. but we're not pinning the quality of our day on 4.6% of our day. We're taking ownership over the 95%, and that's what's super, super, super important.